Hey everyone, welcome to another episode from Your Own Pathway Leadership and Mental Well Being in the Workplace. I hope you all are doing well. I actually got the inspiration for this episode for actually after talking with a group of people who was telling me about a situation in which somebody hired a consultant and if I recall, there was a lot of turnover going on for this company or for this person. And that business consultant that was hired informed the boss that the reason why there was a lot of turnover was because of this boss. And this boss did not believe that it was because of them. And so I listened to the people who were giving me this story, and they were giving me details about this boss, their upbringing, and how growing up with systematic barriers and biases really toughened up this person, and how this person couldn't see how that impacted how she was as a leader and how it was trickling down to her employees. And that's when I said, okay, this person has a lot of unhealed trauma that she is unfortunately passing on or passed on to her coworkers who are now have all quit. And this person couldn't figure out why they had such a turnover in their business. And this got me thinking, this is why therapists are so needed as consultants. And as a therapist, you're probably thinking, oh, Paya is just saying this because she wants business. I'm not going to lie. Of course, I do want business. And yet, there are so many things that as a therapist that we bring to companies, especially when there's a lot of turnaround, when there's a lack of understanding about bosses, leadership, and how their unhealed wounds and unhealed trauma gets passed down to their employees. And in turn, their employees are going to quit. I always say this: employees, people do not quit their jobs, they quit bosses. And when you have unhealed wounds and unhealed trauma and work wounds, yes, yes, you are going to create a lot of turnover for your company, for your team, whatever it is. And so today's episode is discussing why having a therapist as a consultant is a game changer for your business, especially if you cannot figure out why there's so much turnover. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, let let me start by saying this. Having a therapist as a consultant for business dealing with leadership issues isn't just an advantage, it's a game-changing asset. And I'm going to tell you why. As a therapist, we bring emotional intelligence, we have behavioral insight, and we have systems thinking that many traditional consultants may lack. And if you're a consultant watching this, please understand that I'm not trying to undermine your experience or your work. And I will say that there are certain things that as therapists, we come with certain advantages that you may not have. And you, as a consultant, have certain skills that me, as a therapist, may lack also. So I just want to bring out the respect in that. And I want to say here's why, as therapists, we're uniquely positioned to transform leadership and workplace culture. So, number one, we understand human behavior at its core. As therapists, we are trained to recognize emotional patterns, defense mechanisms, and communication styles. One of the advantages that we also have is that we are familiar and we can diagnose mental health disorders. Now, I'm going to say that as a consultant, we're not here to be a therapist. We recognize mental health diagnosis and how they may potentially impact the person as a leader and how that mental health diagnosis may show up. So, diagnosis of mental health disorders, which are often at the root of leadership issues or challenges. And as therapists, we can identify what's really driving conflict or challenges. I don't like to use the word dysfunction. And at times, let's be honest, there are certain dysfunctions going on and occurring within an organization or a team. Another advantage that we have as therapists is we're skilled at navigating the ego, the insecurities, the power struggles, and the emotional triggers of leadership or whoever is in the leadership or the decision making team. And why does this matter? It matters because you cannot fix what you don't understand. And most leadership problems aren't strategic, they're psychological. I'll say that again. Most leadership problems aren't strategic, they're psychological. For anybody who's watching this, who is going through this, or who's been in a position of having a boss where you're just like, what is going on with them? They have so much insecurities, they're projecting, they have, they come to work and you just don't know what person you're going to get for that day. Unfortunately, a lot of that is, again, going back to whatever unhealed wounds, unhealed traumas, ego, whatever it is that they haven't worked through. And because of that power that they have, they're going to abuse that power by making their employees feel whatever it is that they have not worked through. So, number one is, as therapists, as consultants, we're an advantage because we understand human behavior at its core. Moving on to number two, on why having a therapist as a consultant is beneficial, is because we prioritize psychological safety. As therapists, we understand how to foster trust, empathy, and we have safe dialogue. That is part of our training. And this is essential for strong leadership and in order to have cohesive teams. We also help leaders shift from fear based to trust based culture. Unfortunately, in 2025, I still hear a lot about fear based culture versus trust based culture. And when you don't have psychological safety for your team, for your organization, you are not going to get the best of the best. Another thing is that we help guide teams in building vulnerability. And why does all of this matter? It matters because without psychological safety, even the best strategy will fail. When there's a lack of psychological safety, people won't speak up. You will not be able to innovate, and people will definitely not stay. So psychological safety is so essential and so important. And that is something that as therapists, we are good at bringing, especially to organizations and leadership teams. Moving on to number three. And so I mentioned therapists. Like as therapists, we are trained in systems and we see the bigger system at play. Because we are trained in systems thinking, we look at how roles, how history, how trauma, and unspoken dynamics affect the whole team and the whole organization. As therapists, we notice unconscious behaviors, we notice the hierarchies, and especially the power dynamics. When we think of systems, we think of, I think a system that a lot of us all know are family systems. You have mom, dad, parents, whoever. Some family systems have like grandma, grandpa, who are the matriarch, patriarch. It kind of goes down, and whatever they say or whatever they're feeling, whatever it is that they say, go through their history, it all trickles down. And so when you look at a business, think of a system like that, like the matriarch, patriarch, and whoever is part of that system. We notice, and we can spot when leadership styles are reenacting old wounds or unresolved culture issues. And I can give a perfect example of this. So I'm here in Minnesota, and a lot of Minnesota companies, we have some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. And when I talk about culture, I'm not just talking about, a different culture from a different country. I could talk about geographical culture. And a perfect example of this is in Minnesota. For anybody who is in Minnesota who's watching this, we have this stereotype that we are very passive aggressive and that we don't say what we mean, and so people are guessing. And when I work with people who come work like at Target or Best Buy, one of these big organizations, and they're from all over the world and all over the US. They come here, they come work. And one of the things that they tell me is, Paya, I don't get it. People are so weird here. And I say, well, tell me, like, what do you think is weird? They don't tell me how they're feeling. And so I have to guess. I don't want to guess. I need to know how you're feeling. I need to know what you want me to do, what you need me to do. And when you tell me, oh, just do whatever you want, I feel lost. I feel ambivalent. And in turn, that stresses me out. And so I work with the client and say, maybe you need to be more direct. Tell them, tell your boss, tell your coworker what it is that you need, and say it in a way that is respectful. Yes, here in Minnesota, we have this. I don't want to say we have this norm, but we are known to be very passive aggressive and that we can get offended easily. So how you say it matters to us here too. I've had clients from out in the East Coast and they don't get offended easily. That I just want to know, just say how it is. Here in Minnesota, especially in the Midwest, sometimes that doesn't work. And so how you say it very matters because of geographic where we're from. And so that is a cultural difference right there. And so that is part of like the communication style, just unresolved culture issues. Yes, unresolved culture issues. This was I was getting at. So we see that, and it's like, okay, let's problem solve on that matter so that both parties can get what they want and better understanding and better communication. And why does all of this matter? Because leadership breakdowns are often symptoms of deeper organizational dysfunction. Again, I don't like to use the word dysfunction, and yet at times, gotta be honest, there's a lot of dysfunction in certain teams, certain organizations. And as therapists, we can help uncover and treat the root, not just the symptoms. Okay, moving on to number 4. So, having a therapist as a consultant is a advantage because we support leadership growth from the inside out, meaning that instead of just focusing on performance and metrics, as therapists, we help leaders regulate emotions, especially under pressure. I think learning to regulate your emotions as a human, and especially as a boss, and especially as a leader, is such a game changer. Nothing is more chaotic when you have a leader who is not able to regulate their emotions on a day to day basis, and especially when it is under pressure. We also help leaders increase self awareness and do reflective thinking. We ask the hard questions. We ask questions that really make leaders think. We also discuss and encourage leaders to develop healthy boundaries and especially empathy. I would say right now, the number one issue that I see in the workplace is the lack of empathy from leadership. And I'm actually going to do another episode on that here about why having empathy is so important, especially as a leader, and why that can make and break you and your team. Other challenges that we help leaders work through is we help them work through imposter syndrome. All of us at one point of our careers have had imposter syndrome. And unfortunately, I've seen what happens when leaders have imposter syndrome, when they have insecurities. They, instead of acknowledging and working through that, they actually, um, they project their insecurities onto their team. And we also talk about burnout and especially perfectionism, how that, yes, being, being good at your job, being, having high standards for yourself is important, but there are also downsides of perfectionism. So we help leaders work on that. And why does all of this matter? Again, strong leadership isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about being emotionally grounded and self aware. And I'm going to tell you this, your employees and the people under you are going to respect you more if you admit that you don't have all the answers. Reason number 5 on why having a therapist as a consultant is a game changer for your team or organization is we break through when other consultants can't. Remember when I told you the story earlier on about how when a consultant told this boss that said, "You're the issue," and the boss didn't believe them? And when I told my friends, this person has a lot of unhealed wounds and trauma from systematic barriers and trauma and biases that they're now passing on to their employees. Again, other consultants are great at their job. They have a lot of skills. They have a lot of knowledge. And yet, if you don't have that mental health training, it would be hard to work with that specific leader and say, perhaps because of your background, you've had to overcome so much. And because you had to, you are expecting all of this from your employees also. And so having a conversation like this and just opening up and say, yes, you went through a lot. Yes, you overcome a lot of challenges. And yet, have you worked through those wounds? Have you worked through that trauma? Have you considered working with a therapist to really talk about those issues? Because those unresolved wounds and traumas are now being passed onto your coworkers. And so, when traditional consultants rely on frameworks and surface level strategy, as therapists, we ask the questions. We ask the questions that may be hard. We also hold space for the hard stuff, and we facilitate breakthroughs that include in trust, in conflict resolution, and in team alignment. Now, why all of this matters is honestly, you can't KPI your way out of cultural dysfunction. You need someone who can handle what's beneath the surface. And lastly, as therapists, we're trained to have and to normalize the hard conversations. This may include accountability, toxic leadership behaviors, organizational trauma. I'm going to do an episode on organizational trauma. We also can discuss about boundaries and establishing boundaries, burnout, and the breakdowns of organizations, like the human emotion and the breakdowns on that and how they impact an organization. We are trained to have these tough conversations. And I know there's like this meme going around, like, we listen and we don't judge. Therapists, that is what we are trained at. We listen and we don't judge, no matter how hard the conversation is. As a matter of fact, we love it. We lean in. And that's why leadership and organizations need us, therapists, to be consultants on helping organizations and leaderships break down whatever it is that needs to be breakdown in order to be built up. So, final thoughts on this is that bringing in a therapist as a consultant isn't just a soft move, it's a strategic one. Now, I know that soft skills is really coming up very recently about why soft skills is so needed. And yes, therapists were focused on the soft skills. And I'm going to say this, some companies and some organizations are hesitant to hire a therapist as a consultant because you are investing upfront. You're not going to see all your investment right away. You're going to see it later. And so think about this. Yes, we may say, hey, pay us a certain amount, we will work with you, and you're not going to see the investment right away. But you're going to see the investment in having people stay. You're going to have investment in healthy relationships. You're going to have investment in less turnaround in hiring people. And so we're going to save you money in the long run. And it's a strategic one because real leadership growth doesn't happen in spreadsheets or slogans. And this happens in courageous self reflection, behavioral shifts, and intentional healing. Yes, it sounds like a therapy session. And yes, as therapists, when you look at it as an organization, there's a lot of work wounds that need to be healed. And if you don't work on that, it's going to keep breaking. So that is why having a therapist as a consultant is going to be so beneficial for your company. So that is all I have for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like and subscribe button. I'm so excited to bring more topics for leadership and well-being. And if any of you have any ideas or if you have a certain topic that you would like for me to discuss, please put it down in the comment section. Otherwise, I have fun talking about today's episode. And again, as a therapist, I really, really, really hope that if your organization to really consider hiring a therapist as a consultant for your business, for your team, for your organization, especially if you see a lot of breakdowns. We're here to help you, empower you again to forge your own path and to own it. So that is all I have for today. Again, if you're new and if you like this episode, please hit the like and subscribe button. Otherwise, I will see you all next time and take care.